This is something that I used to do on Phantom. I would do some little question and answer type videos while I did maintenance. Thought I would bring it back for Beetlejuice. One that I'm going to answer first, that I get all the time, constantly, on every single video I've ever posted, is show lighting. I do not work in the lighting department. I work in the sound department. I do have some thoughts and ideas on how I could show you a little bit more about our lighting department or about their particular job or the lighting on Beetlejuice or things like that. But they require time, they require permission, they require other people helping me out and being willing to share, because we can't just go and share all this information about the show. We need to make sure that it's above board that we're sharing it. We need to make sure that the people involved are happy, considering their privacy to be involved. So it takes a bit of time, but I work in the sound department, and that is why I can show you things to do with sound. Do mic rigs change as the show goes on and people get more or less comfortable with the original placement? So what I'm doing right now is scratching wig glue off of Tom's Charles rig, because it hardens and then you can just scratch it up. So yeah, do mic placements change as the show goes on and people get more or less comfortable with the original placement? So that's kind of something that we work out and lock in during tech and previews. We will start with a position that is pretty standard and works. I'll usually ask the sound designer what they would like. Sometimes they want the mic a cap down from the hairline. Sometimes they want it in the hairline. Sometimes they want it halfway down the forehead. It is not my choice, and it is to get the sound that we need for the show. Whether that comes down or comes back, or there's costumes that get in the way. We work out all of that stuff during tech. I think sometimes performers get a little bit upset that the show they did last time, they were able to have their microphones hidden in their hairline, and then on this show, or the show that they're doing currently, the microphone is in the middle of their head and it's really visible, and that feels frustrating to them because they had it there last time, so why can't they have it there again this time? And there are a lot of reasons for that. All the microphones that we use on shows are often different. They're different kinds of mics. They have a different frequency response. They have different setups going on within the system. The show itself might be louder on stage, the songs might be bigger, the performer might be quieter. There are so many things that impact somebody's mic placement and why it is the way that it is, and the important thing is that once we lock in a mic position that the operator is happy with and can mix the show comfortably from, getting enough from the performer, then we try and maintain that position every single night, because what the person at the front is doing when they're mixing is they usually learn the show from memory. They work with a script in the beginning, but then by the end of a run, they might be completely off script. Similar to playing in a band or something, you might need the sheet music and then eventually you're off book and you don't need it because you can memorize it. But a part of that is knowing where you need to throw the fader and what level you need to hit for that part of the show, for the way that the performer does it, which is also why performers who are incredibly consistent in their performance and delivery are the favorites of the sound team. Because say you're in a scene where usually you would yell in the middle of your sentence. The operator will then know, I usually have them about here, they're going to yell, so I'm going to pull them back. If you just suddenly start yelling, it's going to really jump out of the mix, blast the audience, and not be a comfortable sound because you've done something different that the operator didn't expect. The operator is constantly mixing based on what the performer is giving them, which is incredible and really helpful if you've got a performer who does the same thing every single night. Now we've gone on to mixing. So the point is that once we are at opening, usually from that point on, their mic positions will stay the same. The only reason that might change is because a performer gets more comfortable with the performance that they're giving and they're able to be louder. They might get more comfortable with the songs that they are singing. So back to the original question, now that I've gone on 2 tangents, normally after opening is done, the mic position is locked in and it will not change. But throughout the period before opening tech previews is where we are figuring out people's mic positions and where they need to go, and whether that will change throughout the show even. Comment from Instagram, very interested in the paint. Assuming the gear is hired, do you have to remove the paint at the end of the run before the gear is returned? So it depends on what kind of show you're doing. For me personally, right now on Beetlejuice, no. I do not have to return them in a particular condition because the show owns these microphones. They're considered a consumable. They are bought for this show, for these performers, and they are considered something that will wear and tear throughout the season. And that's pretty common for most professional commercial productions. The microphones will be bought specifically for that show, brand new to go on the person, and they belong to the show and the producers, so you don't have to return them anywhere and you do not have to worry about returning them to their original condition. One, I've done a lot of community theatre and smaller like school shows or things like that, sometimes you are hiring them from somebody else. Sometimes you're hiring them, sometimes you work for the hiree and you aren't really allowed to do a lot of things to change the microphones in themselves. In those situations, you just may not be able to paint at all. And that is a forgiven factor in the situation of what you're doing. I try to, at the end of a contract, strip paint if I can and just return them to the producer in a condition that they might see them and go, we could probably use that on something if we do need a mic, which doesn't really happen, but I just try to return them in a condition where someone's going to look at them and see them as a viable option just in case that is something that they're looking for. Why won't this? I'm running out. I need to get more too hard. So, short answer to the question is no. I do not need to return these microphones to anywhere. They are bought specifically for the show, so I don't have to worry that the paint job that I'm doing is going to stay on them forever. I would love if they stayed for longer, I'm not gonna lie. I'm really struggling with painting this particular brand and series of microphones. We're using Sennheiser MKE1s, and they have this like slick coating on top of them, which is meant to help them from sweating, I believe. But they actually just make it incredibly difficult for the microphone itself to hold paint, and that is really shit for me. I'm going to answer a fun one that I think people find a bit weird to talk about, but that we all kind of talk about in the industry. Absolutely no shade in any capacity to the person who asked me this question. It was a genuine question, and I completely understand why the question is the way it is, but it leads me to a topic that I think about often. So, welcome to the rant. Somebody asked, how do the crew not fangirl over the cast? And I think the answer to that is both we do, in the same way that they fangirl over us, and also that you need to remember that this is a workplace, and that performers are just people. I remember talking to a performer once about how crazy and overwhelming and jarring it can be sometimes to have fans of shows that they're in come to them and be, like, to pedestal them, to be in interactions with them and treat them like they are not the same. To be like, oh my gosh, I'm such a fan of you, which automatically creates this pedestaling, for lack of a better term, of the other person, when the reality, especially in Australia, where we don't get many shows at a time, we're not like Broadway or the West End where we've constantly got like hundreds of shows, hundreds I say quite generously. We don't have a shitload of shows going where performers can just jump and bounce around. Sometimes the only difference between the performer that you love being your local barista or Pilates teacher and being in the leading cast of your favorite show is that they happened to be in the right age bracket, stage of their career at the right time for when the right show where the creatives wanted them for that role has happened. I got lost a little bit in the sentence there, but I think you know what I'm saying. For example, Karis Oka is Lydia. We know this. No one has looked at her and gone, oh, weird that she'd be cast as Lydia. We all knew that she matched the vibe, she sings the fuck out of the songs, she's an absolute delight to work with. If Beetlejuice didn't come right now to Australia and it came in 10 years' time, she might not be considered for the role the way that she was because she'd be 10 years older. And that's just an example. I'm thrilled that everything has aligned in a way that I get to work on Beetlejuice right now with the one, the only, the incredible Australia's own Karis Oka in the show. But I'm just giving an example of like, there are a lot of things in your control and there are a lot of things out of your control as a performer. And that is, I think, one of the downsides that those of us who don't perform don't often consider about performing, which is incredibly rough. Not that it comes down to luck, but some of it does come down to luck. And the things that people do in between those contracts to stay afloat, to keep making money, which I think most performers in Australia have to do at some point. It's incredibly common and there's nothing wrong with it. It doesn't say anything about how talented they are or how talented they aren't, whatever. They're just people. They're incredibly talented people who are very good at what they do. You also have to remember that the rest of us who are here working backstage are that for our own departments. You know, there are some of us who are greener than others. There are some of us who've done less shows or that this is our first show. There are some of us that have been doing this for 20, 30, 40 years and have an absolutely wild catalogue of shows under our belt and on our CV. Some of us teach at unis in between times. Some of us have done designing. Some of us have won awards. Some of us, you know, like everyone here is at a certain caliber, including backstage. I'm being very general here. Oh my gosh. What I'm trying to say is that everyone here is doing an incredible job. The cast do not see themselves as better than us. We are all co-workers doing our very specific, very niche talent required part to make this incredible, beautiful thing come to life and run smoothly. And that is beautiful. We absolutely fangirl over the cast in the same way that the cast fangirl over us. When somebody mixes the show for the first time, the cast will stand and applaud them. When somebody does a new plot, somebody will tell them they've done great. When any of us achieve in any part of the company, it is celebrated. I know that for viewers, for audience members, what you see being celebrated is the cast. And you might have noticed in bows that often the cast will point to front of house, like behind you. They'll point to back of house, to the crew that are there, and that is like a small acknowledgement of the people that aren't bowing on stage but who are just as much a part of bringing the show together. The cast are the ones who have to be the face of that, which I think both has its advantages and perks and disadvantages. There are definitely, absolutely many people I have fangirled over. A particular one that I can think of is Raphael Wong when we were on Phantom, when he went on for the Phantom. I have never seen more people packed into the wings than I have when he was singing Music of the Night for the first time in front of an audience on that production. All of us weeping, crying, screaming, applauding, just full of so much emotion, absolutely fangirling for this person. But it's not in a parasocial way. It's not in a way of, I don't know you, but I'm so in awe of you. It's in a way of, you are incredible and your achievements are incredible, and I work with you, and I'm proud of you as your friend and as your co-worker. And hopefully that makes it easier for you to meet them at stage door and have just a comfortable conversation with a person who does a thing that you really respect, instead of seeing them as different to you, or bigger than you, or better than you, because they don't see themselves that way to you. Do you have a certain mic model that you like to work with? And the honest answer to that is that I try not to have a favorite, because I will never get to pick. It is never my choice. It is the choice of the sound designer. It is one of the elements that comes as part of the sound design. They all have their advantages, they all have their disadvantages, whether that is because they break often or they are prone to having issues, whether they're easy to paint, whether they keep paint for long periods of time. There are so many reasons why a mic might be good or might be bad, and I just try to work with what I've got and not get attached, because I will never have a say in what mics I'm using. Would you be able to explain the purpose of the Tuesday tech run? How does that work without the cast? This is from a video that I posted about a day in the life doing tech. So that particular video, the cast were there for that Tuesday tech run, but I wanted to talk a little bit about tech runs to give you more of an idea about what we're doing and why and how they work or might look like. So on a show like this, we tech the show with the cast, we tech the show without the cast, we tech bits of the show, we tech elements of the show, we tech the show as a whole. We do all of those different things at different times depending on what we need. An incredibly common example is at the absolute start of a show and of a run, or even just when we change cities. We will do a full bump in without the cast. The crew will do bump in, and then they will do what we call a dry tech. This means that we run all of the technical elements in the show without cast on stage. This means if the show has a revolve, we run the revolve. If the show has auto cues, we run the auto cues. If there are particular lighting changes, we run the lighting changes. All the technical elements happen. If we need someone to stand on stage or to be part of that, normally another crew member or a member of stage management usually will do that. The person who calls the show will call it as we do this tech run. It's for people to get comfortable with the technical elements of the show before we have cast there that we need to make sure aren't in the way or at risk or any of those things, and also to make sure that all of it works safely before we put a cast member in a position where they could potentially be hurt. So we do that. We then do multiple days or weeks sometimes, depending on how long the show's been going for, whether you're learning it for the first time or how complicated it is. We do tech with the cast. On all the shows that I've worked on, predominantly, you will tech the normal full cast, like not swings, not blah blah blah. Swings will sometimes get a tech in, covers will get a tech for the tracks that they do, but a lot of the times, a lot of swings will go on without a tech, especially swings. Covers will usually get some kind of tech. And if there are parts of the show that require specific tech runs or have tech challenges, they might run that one scene in full tech conditions before we do a show, or during the gap between shows on a 2-show day. The times where that is different and where we tech a scene or a situation in a show multiple times that I've experienced is when we have children in the show. When we have children in the show, like for example, we did this on Tina. If you didn't know, the last show that I did was the Tina Turner musical. I toured that for the last 2 years around Australia. We had young performers for the roles of Little Anime, Tina when she was a child and her sister Arlene, and we had 2 sets of those kids in the building at all times, but we had 4 sets of kids. So throughout our tech period, we would tech in all of the scenes that the kids were in and all the scenes like going into it and going out of that scene. We would have to tech with every coupling of those kids. So we had to tech for longer and tech more times. But it was very important, because they are children especially, that they were able to experience the tech before we had an audience and a full live show. Throughout a season, we will do what is called like cover techs, where people will tech in tracks that they have not done yet or that they are covering, as the name would suggest. For example, the tech that I did in that video was us teching in a whole bunch of covers for principal roles. The way that we did that was we had a session that was broken down into like bitsy, like stop and start technical moments with just that lead cast and some swings to help fill the gaps or fill the moments in the show where the ensemble interact with the principal cast. And then a few days after that, we did a full conditions tech where the people who were going into a new track, they were in full costume, full wigs, and we had full technical elements, mics, lighting, all the things. And when we did that, we had a full ensemble in, not just swings like running around filling the gaps. So yes, sometimes we do tech the show without cast, but most of the time we tech them with the cast because it is often for the cast. If a new crew member comes in and is learning a new plot, usually we have swings come in for those departments or built in to the departments already. We also have 2 tech swings. We all saw that, right? Well, yeah, usually if a crew member is learning a new role, a swing will cover them and they will learn as the show is happening. I had a couple of questions about the patching that I do during the show. One of them was, I'm very surprised that live patching is going on. Wonder if they did that or are still doing that on the tours and other show locations for Beetlejuice. Someone then replied to another comment around that saying, live patching sounds so stressful, but what a smart way to change things live without freaking out the mixer any more than they need to be. And then they asked, how many channels of wireless does the show use? The most I've worked with is 25. 36. We have 36 channels on this show that we're using for RF, and that includes all the cast mics. On Tina, we had over 60, because not only were the cast all on RF, but also a lot of the band were as well, and we had in-ear monitors too. It was a time. Part of that person's comment also answered the question about live patching and why we're doing it. It's just a sound design thing. The other option that I have seen and experienced from me patching in the correct patch for a split track during the show would be that, say a performer's doing a split track, right? They're doing one track normally for the whole show, but then for one song, they're stepping into another character's track with different lines and parts of the mix on the console programming coming up. In other shows I've done, the person mixing would have to go through before the hour and reprogram the show to bring up the correct transmitter at the right time. That can get a bit messy for if you save something correctly or incorrectly, or you forget to change it, or all of those things. It is actually much simpler that I just patch it in down here. Back in the day, and on some shows, I know that we can still do a pack swap. So instead of me patching, you would physically just put a different transmitter on that person. That obviously gets complicated if you don't have the time for that. So it's all just part of the sound design. This is the first time I've been on a show where I've done live patching, and it was incredibly scary at first, but now it is less scary. When we get a cast change, if there is a split track on it, I will sit down and work out when this person needs to change, what pack they're meant to be on, what patch that is, and then I will make sure I know when to do it, where I'm going in and out from, and then I check with the person on B-plot that they check that the mic is coming down the correct channel based on what the patch should be before it hits stage, and the operator just throws it up. It means that they don't have to change the programming every single time we have a split track. It allows for a lot more freedom, actually, which is really helpful. And as for whether they do it on other shows of Beetlejuice, yes. I don't have confirmation of that, but I'm going to confidently say yes, because the point of a sound design for shows like this is that we do it the same way. The show file that Anthony is using to mix every day is a show file from another show that we have adjusted for our show, but is hypothetically entirely the same. This is because the sound design is intellectual property of the show. It is part of the design of the show in the same way that the script or the choreography or the music is. Also, for incredibly helpful technical reasons. For example, it doesn't really happen here because we've only got one version of the show running and there are only 3 people in the entire country who know how to mix the show. But say you're on Broadway, for Beetlejuice. There's a Broadway show of Beetlejuice happening, but there's also a tour happening. That happens pretty often in the States. Say the person on Broadway goes down, or the person mixing on the tour goes down. Everyone who's on the tour who knows how to mix goes down. They emergency need somebody to come and mix the show. They call up the team on Broadway, say, do you have someone to spare for the weekend who can mix the show? They fly them out, even though it's a different show, a different cast, in a different city. The system, the programming, and the mix should hypothetically be exactly the same. So they can walk in, mix the show. Might be a bit rough because it's a cast they're not used to working with, but everything in the programming and in the console itself will be the same. That is why that is a thing. I'm sure there are other reasons, but those are the reasons that I'm aware of. I had 2 questions on the microphones on Beetlejuice video that I did. Go and check it out if you haven't seen it. I'm very proud of it and I love it. Saying, are those DPAs? Also, what belt packs are you using? No, these are Sennheiser MKE1s. Not gonna lie to you, they're not my favorite microphone that I've worked with. We are learning to love each other and we will work well together. That's what we're gonna do. What belt packs are you using? We are using Sennheiser SK6212s. These are great. They're very small, they're very compact. The batteries in them last for 14 hours, which is incredible for us because it means that on a 2-show day, we don't have to change batteries between shows, which can leave room for error, issues, batteries dying sooner. They're great. Love them. Love, 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 love them, and I think a lot of shows now are using them because of the battery life and because they are so convenient and small and great. Please go into more detail on the wig lace and glue method. I absolutely will. My video for August, the tutorial on my Patreon for August, will be about mic up. It will be about putting mics on people. I'm going to demonstrate it for you and give you all the information, and I will be talking about it in that. So if you want to see that, or just how to mic up people, go to the Patreon. That tutorial will be live at some point in August. I am just working on it at the moment, trying to take my time with Patreon videos and make them as good as possible rather than get them up as quickly as possible. So that will be the August tutorial. The Patreon will be linked in my description if you want to go and check it out. I had a couple of questions about mic checks, both on YouTube videos. One says, do the cast do mic checks before every show, or is it mainly between you and the sound team? And can you talk more about how the cast prompt for the mic check works? Are they all coming one by one to the monitoring station? And I will talk about this because it is different here than it is everywhere else in the world. So, on Broadway, and I think on the West End as well, but I could be wrong. The cast do not do mic checks. They also don't do a warm-up for most shows. They will rock up at the half, from what I've seen and heard and been told by people who've done that work. They will rock up at the half. They are responsible for their own warm-up. They just get into their costume and their wigs and their mics and then do a show. They also mic themselves, or wham, or mic them. I think that is also quite similar in the UK. I know in the UK that they do not often do mic checks. The reason that we do them here, and the reason why I think it is a brilliant idea that we do them, is during the preset before a show, the team and I will do mic checks. I put batteries in all the transmitters. I take all the transmitters out into the auditorium, and I will individually, one by one, count into them. You will have seen me doing it in videos if you've been here for a second. I will count into all the microphones individually, and I'm also at the same time, which I can now do one-handed, but you can do two-handed, obviously. I'm at the same time wiggling both the connection between the antenna, the microphone. I'm wiggling this end point of the mic and around the top of the mic, and that is because those are the 2 places that a mic is most likely to break, to see if there are any issues or potential breaks that are coming. I will be wiggling the connection to make sure that there are no issues there, that it's not making any noise. I will check that the mic and the antenna are on as tight as possible. I'll also sometimes, if it's a really cold place that we're in, stage management are yelling, 1 second. I will also, if we're in a very cold place or a cold theatre, wiggle the packs, because sometimes if they get too cold, they make this like hoo 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 noise. It's really cool and really interesting, and you just wiggle it out and warm it up and they will stop making the noise. I've only ever had that really happen and be a common thing when we were doing Hamilton in Sydney. Never had it outside of that. It might have just been the transmitters we were using that are particularly prone to that, but that is really cool. So we do that at the top of every show. I will check all the microphones individually with Anthony at front of house. He will put every single mic up. I will count into them. I'll do my wiggles and my checks and my tightenings, and he can then hear what's going on with the mics, how they sound compared to each other in case one of them is getting dull or quiet. or has an issue or is distorting or any of those things, it is a much more controlled environment to check if there is something wrong with the mics, because it is my exact voice. I'm speaking the same and saying the same thing on every single mic, one after the other, when nothing else is happening. It's a lot harder to hear those issues if you're only hearing it in an uncontrolled environment, such as in the middle of a show, on a performer whose voice you might not be so familiar with. Some people who mix shows prefer to mic check with their own voice. Others prefer to use the voice of their team. Anthony's been sound checking to my voice for the last 3-4 years, so probably pretty comfortable with that and knows what it sounds like and what my mic check sounds like, because I just count to 10 on every mic, which is pretty common. We then belt up all the mics, we deliver them, the cast come and put them on when they're getting ready, and then before they start the show, the cast will come to the mic station one by one. We put up a prompt so that they have something to inspire them to talk or to sing, so that we can check that their mic sounds good. We also check, and this is where we differ to other countries, we do a mic check where they have to go to mic check before we start the show. There are certain shows and characters where you might do a mic check later in the show. For example, on Phantom, the Phantom does not check at the top of the show like everybody else, because he's still usually getting into makeup. He will check at a song later on down in the show before he makes his first appearance, but he will do a mic check before he goes to stage. In a lot of other countries, they will just check while the cast is standing on stage talking, or in the wings talking, getting ready to go on. Here in Australia, it is very much what is normally done, that the cast will come to the mic station and do a mic check where we can visually see them and where they answer a prompt. Some cast members, especially ones who come from overseas and come and work here, hate it because they're not used to doing it. They think it's a waste of time. What we're doing in that moment is not only listening to your mic to make sure it sounds okay, but I am visually checking your mic position to make sure that it is okay, that it is where it's meant to be, so that if you're quiet but you're in the right position, we know that there's something potentially wrong with the mic, so we know it's not tucked up under a wig or under a hat or any of the other things that can happen to microphones in that time. It is incredibly valuable. It gives you a nice opportunity and chance to say hello to some of your co-workers before the show starts, and the show will not start until we give clearance to stage management and to the person operating at front of house that all mics have been checked and have no faults. I think I would have a little mentee bee working overseas where they don't do mic checks as the norm, based on the amount of issues that we correct at mic checks on some shows. How many issues come up simply because you don't lay visual eyes on someone's mic and have a moment to isolated listen to them in a controlled-ish environment before a show starts. I can only imagine the amount of issues that come up because of that. Hope that tangent answers your questions about mic checks. 2 questions around getting jobs. Any specific skills you'd recommend building to get to this level of work, and what do you recommend including on CVs for getting your first pro job? Skills I would recommend building in order to get to this level of work are being teachable and figuring out what you need to remember things. If you know you are somebody who needs to write something down to remember it, or that you're not going to remember it just being told once, or that you know you need to visually be shown, figure out what is actually going to make it easy for you to remember something, because often you're only shown a plot a couple of times, or you're in a bump in and you're only shown what you're doing once, and then you're expected to go ahead and do it. If you know this person just telling me this instruction is not actually going to make me know what I'm doing and what is going on, know that you need to be confident and comfortable asking for someone to show you, and maybe even video it if you need to. If you need to write notes as it's happening or write down the process as it's happening, do that. Nobody is going to be upset with you for asking to be told something in a different way, for asking further questions on something that you don't understand, for, like, there is no shame in looking like you don't know something you're being taught for the first time. What will actually be frustrating to other people is when you say, yeah, I've got it, and then you go ahead and do it wrong, and they have to go back and correct it anyway. So I would recommend knowing how you learn and then being ready to apply that. That is incredibly helpful and will make you incredibly valuable in a workplace or bump-in situation. Probably not a skill that you thought I was going to say, but genuinely one that I think is so important. What should you include on your CV? I answered this in, I think, the opening week vlog in more detail, but references of people who have a connection to the industry. References. Good references. We're getting through them. We're getting through the questions. One question was, how did Geo become such a legend? I do believe that Geo was born that way. I believe from the moment that Geo entered this world, she was born to be an icon. I don't make the rules, I simply see the facts. How long was tech for this? At what point did the musicians join tech? Do they even tech? Yes. So usually while we are bumping in, there will be a rehearsal room set up, usually in the few days before the cast come in for tech and are welcome into the theatre. There will be a rehearsal space set up where the band play all together and run the show and do all that. So they kind of do their own rehearsals. Obviously, I imagine the individual players do their own rehearsals and try and learn the show, and then they put it all together in a rehearsal room before we bump in, and then we will tech usually just with like keys and drums for a long time, and then we will start doing runs with a full band. How long was the tech for this show? Let me go back and find out the exact answers. So we did 1, 2, 3 weeks of prep in the warehouse for sound. We then did 2.5-ish weeks of bump in and tech without the cast. And then we did 2 weeks of tech without an audience. And then we started having previews. Previews, we were still doing tech sessions and rehearsal sessions in the day. So we did that where we would do like tech and then a show in the nighttime for about 2 weeks as well. So all up our production period for this, including warehouse prep until opening night, was for sound about 9 weeks, which is a lot. What is the best song in the show to perform/watch? Obviously I don't perform them, but to watch, my favorite is still Beautiful Sound. I love it. It is chaos, it is so much fun, and I love it. What other role or crew position would you want to try? I want to do more roles within sound. I want to be a deputy and potentially a head of sound at some point if that is in my cards. That is something that I'd be interested in doing. But in terms of other crew positions in theatre at this level, I don't think so. In other parts of the industry, I would love to do more lighting stuff, small venue, fringe, cabaret world. I've done a lot of lighting in those settings and I would be very happy to do more of that. I've also done some design for fringe and cabaret level shows and I've loved that so much, but in general I think it's been something I've spoken about a bit. My end goal in my life is to own a venue, so I'll end up having to do a little bit of everything, I think, which I'm really excited for and excited to continue working towards. I got 2 questions which are kind of similar, which are, what's been the most challenging but fun part of this production, and what's challenging about this show that wasn't in others? Honestly, Beetlejuice has been a dream. Beetlejuice has been a dream. Anything that could be a huge issue hasn't been. The show creatives at an international level and our company here are so incredible and thoughtful and see so far ahead and consider other people in such a way that things that should be an issue haven't been. I have a lot of hats in this show, which I didn't have on Tina, which is a little bit challenging sometimes, but that's really so chill. The final question that I had was, how does this show compare in difficulty to the other shows you've done? I'm going to be really honest right now. After doing Tina, like I said, I did the last 2 years at the Tina Turner Musical. Tina was the hardest show I've ever done. My plot, in particular, was awful. It was incredibly difficult. Mostly because, 1, Tina never comes off stage. The actress who plays Tina will be on stage for like 98% of the show. Most of her changes happen on stage. She comes off like maybe 4 or 5 times throughout the entire show for like 30-second quick changes, and that's it. Very minimal chance to fix anything, to fix any issues, to adjust microphones, to do anything. Once she's on stage, you're kind of stuck with what's going on, and that can be really challenging and overwhelming. I had to preemptively fix a lot of things that could come up, even if they weren't going to come up most likely, because of knowing that I would not have a chance to fix her again until 6 songs later. And even then it would be a really small window and short and not great opportunity to do so. As well as this, we had a whole bunch of mic stands in the show that we used. I think a lot of people thought these were props. They were not. For many reasons they were not, but it was also just part of the sound design. The microphone stands were heavy. They caused me to injure my ribs at one point because they were heavy. They had transmitters in the base of the stand and then cabling that would run through the base up the mic stand part and then into a microphone. Every single time those microphones came on and off stage, they changed. Where they went on, where they came off. Who was using the microphone stand? Which microphone was on the stand? It would either be a SM57, 58 or like a Chrome 55, and they would rotate throughout the show. Over 20 different performers used those mic stands. I had to remember their heights. The heights would change constantly as well, even if the same person was using the same stand, because the different costumes and the choreography of different songs meant that they were taller or shorter. Some of them went up in a lift through the stage, other ones were run on and off from side stage. That part of it was horrific to figure out and learn. Anyone wanting to learn my plot or having to learn my plot was not thrilled by the experience. There were so many issues with mic stands. It was also quite a sweaty show. There was a lot of speakers, in-ear monitors, and microphones that went into props as well. That was the busiest, most chaotic, most stressful, most overwhelming show I've ever done. By the end, obviously, I was like, this is just another day, whatever. But I specifically remember the first time we ran Act 1 fully in Sydney during the tech period, during Fight No More, which is the song that's at the end of Act 1, which is a really emotional song anyway. I laid down on the floor and cried because it was so overwhelming. Tina was hard. Phantom was difficult in some ways because I had less experience. I was facing new challenges that I'd never dealt with before, and that in itself can be a challenge. HOSH was outside, so that made it chaos, but Tina was definitely the most challenging show that I've ever done and ever been responsible for. In comparison, this show is very relaxed for me, but every show has its own challenges, every show has its own issues, and the fun of doing the job is learning how to deal with those and combat those and correct them. Any show will become boring when you've done it 600 times. Any plot, no matter how hard it is, will feel boring when you've done it 600 times. So at the start, even if something is incredibly overwhelming or stressful, I try not to anymore take it as, oh my god, this is going to be so awful for the rest of the time that we're doing this, because I know that with ease and with repetition, it gets better, it gets easier. Tina, I felt like I had absolutely zero time between cues, maybe even not enough time between cues when we first started the show, and by the end, I was bored during acts because I felt like I had too much time. It's all a thing, but Beetlejuice is definitely not for me and my plot the hardest show I've ever worked on, but there are still plenty of things that I'm learning and being challenged by. Thank you for joining me to answer some questions. I am gonna start doing this a bit more regularly. Maybe I could even do this like once a month, depending on how many questions people have. So if you have any questions about Beetlejuice, about the shows that we're doing, about us going to Abu Dhabi, about us going to Singapore that you want to know, leave them below or send me a message and I will answer them in a video. Thanks for hanging out.